Okay, good morning. You can catch me on Twitter at The Sandbarns. I'm posting the occasional article at thesandbarns.com. As Matt said, I'm currently the co-founder of Pathfinder DPM with Brett Harned, and we're hoping to take DPM to the next level with training and consulting that focuses on the realities of managing digital projects versus just the theory. Now, in my career, I've worked in a few different roles, and I can honestly say that without doubt, the job where I felt the most pushed and pulled was the digital project manager role. When someone asked me how my day had been, I rarely had the energy to give a full account, so I'd often just show them a movie clip of how it felt. So, here I am, dealing with a shitload of people and issues that just seems endless. There's developers, designers, here's a boss, he wants me to work loads of overtime. Well, guess what, Mr. Bossman? I don't think I'm going to do that, boom. And then, of course, there's all the clients who want all the scope change, basically no, 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 and no. However, on reflection, I think this might have been one of those cases where you think you look like a badass warrior in complete control, but where the reality is sort of different. I love this so much, I'm going to let it go again. Have some water. Okay. But in all seriousness, unless you've actually been a DPM, I think it's really difficult to understand what it's actually like. It's not that other jobs aren't hard and don't have days like ours, but there's just something about being a DPM that takes it to the next level. I think a few factors contribute to this, such as DPM's young age means that we're really still finding our feet in terms of broadly agreed best practices. Because of this, I think reasonable DPM workload levels haven't really been as established as in other areas in our space. And in many cases, DPMs are still doing the role of many. Thus, in a way, we're sort of like the webmasters of digital delivery. But I think the main reason being a DPM is on a different level is due to the sheer number of people and things we have to deal with in parallel and on a daily basis. Plus, your knowledge and work has to span across a full range of disciplines. For example, it's not actually uncommon for us to need some level of knowledge in all of these areas, while managing just a few projects. I mean, that's a lot of shit, right? We have to know a lot of stuff. It's not that other roles in our industry don't contain lists like this, but in my experience, those lists are shorter, and the level of knowledge needed are usually focused at a more high or low level, rather than needing to span all levels. And this is what I think is somewhat unique to the DPM role. We have to deal with all things at every level, right from long-term strategic through to mid-term goals for both ours and the client's company, and right down to the nuts and bolts of who the hell left that lorem ipsum in there. By the way, if you're still using classic lorem ipsum, it's really last year. Why would you use it when you can use Slipsum? Otherwise known as Samuel L. Ipsum. That's my kind of placeholder copy. It's an oldie, but a goodie. And for those that find that a little too strong, you can always switch to Slipsum Light, where everything's just a little nicer. Anyway. So as a DPM, when you're operating at the centre of this intense environment on a daily basis, it's so deceptively easy to lose sight of what should be your focus, delivering quality projects, and instead be drawn into all sorts of bad things that, will ultimately chip away at your soul, perhaps to the point where you become someone that you don't really like and people don't enjoy working with. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. Because in my career, while managing up to 20 concurrent projects in not-so-nice work environments, at times I began to lose sight of what I was doing and why. And the scary thing is that despite being a reasonably self-aware person, I didn't see it happening, despite the signs being there. So I simply want to talk to you about what these experiences taught me, in the hope that I can save some of you some of the pain that I've been through in order to learn these lessons. And I want to explain to you a philosophy that I believe in for both work and life that's encapsulated by the title of this presentation. So, where to begin? Well, how about with a huge mistake I made early in my DPM career, and not one I'm proud to admit. But it is a true story, and when I look back at the thousands of interactions that I've had, I think this one, is right up there with one I would just wish I could go back and change. So, I started working for a company and was told I was going to be a DPM for a really, really important project. It was sold a few months before I joined, but it only really kicked off maybe a couple of days before I started. This was very exciting times for me. I was a very happy boy. Then I started to read the proposal that had been used to sell the work. And you know, when you get that feeling that something isn't quite right? Well, as I kept reading, that feeling just grew stronger and stronger until finally my mood completely changed. And the reason for this was that, based on my prior experience, I figured this to be at least a sort of £350,000 project with a timeline of no less than a year. Well, guess what? It had been sold for £60,000 and was due to be completed in 4 months. It was at this point my training kicked in and I instinctively begun the DPM recovery process, which I think we all know very well. This wasn't cool or exciting for me anymore at all. Anyway, the project started and I became the sole client contact. As I got my teeth into the project, I tried to explain to my boss that the timeline and the budget that had been sold were crazy, all right? But all I got back were comments about how I should be more optimistic and carry on. I think we've all had that at one point, I imagine. And being inexperienced, I didn't really challenge that instruction too much. A few weeks later, the client decides they want to bring all of the senior people in, all the directors, all the bigwigs, for a big meeting. And on the day of the meeting, about an hour before they arrived, my client decided to spring the news on me that I'd be running the meeting alone. And now remember, this was, the agency's really their most important project. And I'd only been there, a few weeks by this point. I said to say I wasn't happy about this would definitely be an understatement. Especially as I could see in his face that I think he was totally avoiding it, because by now I think he knew just how badly this project had been sold. So I asked my boss, what should I say about the launch date? And the reply absolutely killed me. He said, tell them it'll be ready on time. I replied, even though we both know it won't be, and it's going to be at least many, many months late, yes. And that was the end of the conversation. The clients arrived. We went into the boardroom, and I did it. I followed my orders, and I told the client that their project would be completed on time. Everyone in the room was happy, everyone except me. Now, despite this being many years ago, I still remember that awful feeling as if it were yesterday. I mean, I swear, I literally felt a physical sensation in the pit of my stomach and in my chest. It was as if everything had been turned inside out and upside down all at once. And it turns out this was my integrity being ripped from my body. It felt like I'd not only betrayed my clients, but also myself and my colleagues, and it just felt so, so bad. Only many years later would I realise just how much this moment, this single moment, would impact on how I operate today. I vowed soon after to never do this again, and I'm pleased to say that I never did. And that's what the title of this presentation is all about. You can do well, or you can do good. I stole this quote from an excellent film called Spooks, The Greater Good. And it's said in relation to really hard decisions that we all face during our careers. And those are decisions where choosing to do well is impressing your boss, advancing your career, or protecting your job. Whereas doing good means risking all of that, potentially suffering career damage, but ultimately doing the right thing. So my question to all of you now is, what would you have done? It's so easy to say that you do good, but I can assure you, when faced with this dilemma, and others like it, but let's face it, in our industry, they tend to be less clear-cut and much more subtle. It's much more difficult than you think. And you'd be surprised how, when facing these decisions, your mind can twist anything to make it palatable for your conscience, to the point of delusion where you can convince yourself that you're just doing your job. And if you do this enough, it can change you to the point where it becomes your normal behaviour, and that's really, really hard to come back from. As it turns out, the project ran on for well over a year, got to around £700,000, and was probably still only about 2/3 of the way through. We didn't finish it. The client was absolutely appalled, and rightly so. The cherry on top was that my boss told me the main reason this project had failed was because of my negative and pessimistic attitude from the start, sorry. Yeah, you could say I had certain, feelings on that particular statement too. In fact, I had such strong feelings about it that I almost summoned Spock to go to work on this guy. I wish I had that button. So could I have avoided this? Well, I'm not sure. But if I think back honestly, there were plenty of signs that I was losing my way as a DPM and heading down a really wrong path. This was a path where I was choosing to do well rather than good. So I'm going to talk about some of those signs now, and this also serves as my kind of DPM, just don't do that list now. So first up is client bashing. Now, don't get me wrong, I've done plenty of client bashing in the past. It's pretty much always funny, often cathartic. But with the benefit of being able to look back over my entire career to date, again, I wish it was something I could go back and change. Why? Well, because I think over time it slowly erodes some of the core fundamentals that both you as a DPM and everyone at your company should be looking to preserve in order to maintain a high level of service. I've no doubt that when you or your team speak to clients, you're very professional. But if deep down, you mock your clients, then by default, you see them as inferior, and thus it's really impossible to respect them. And if you don't respect your clients, how on earth can you, hand on heart say that you're delivering the best possible service for them? I just don't think this is possible, and is one subtle sign that your focus as a DPM is starting to get a little skewed. I believe as a DPM, you should be as much of a champion for your clients as you are for your own company. Another serious side effect to cultural and constant client bashing is that it can start to blind you and your whole agency for some very important truths, such as assessing just how good the service is that you're providing. If you think about it, by always laughing at the client's expense, looking down at them and blaming them for problems, it means that you stop looking inwardly for faults, all right? And instead you begin to believe it's everyone else's fault, and this arrogance can be highly infectious to the rest of your team and company. As I said at the very first DPM UK event, I believe that if a client is failing, you're failing, and not them. And I think the more you can use this as your foundation attitude towards clients, the better chance you have of staying on what I believe to be the right path. So another sign that you're starting to lose focus is forgetting project teams are humans. This pretty much happened to me as I hurtled down the wrong path, and I didn't realise it until many, many years later. It happened because I was just too damn busy working in a toxic environment where I felt under incredible scrutiny and I was being blamed for all sorts of shit that was completely and utterly out of my control. Looking back at that time, I can see now that rather than engaging with my project teams, I kind of saw them as just another part of the machine I had to keep going in order to churn through projects. So how did this manifest itself? Truthfully, by me being a completely unreasonable dickhead with my project teams. The team would estimate their work and I would build a schedule around it, I'm sure as many of you do here. But it only took a really small amount of people to miss their deadline, and suddenly my world of 500 spinning plates was looking like an absolute nightmare. Combined with the fact that I had to manage so many projects at once, and thus by default a large portion of the agency's scheduling meant that any delays had a really big knock-on effect to other critical business areas, such as payment schedules, cash flow, allocation for other projects, and so on. In other words, because I was being scrutinised and blamed for so much, plus had an insane workload, when something started to go wrong on one of my projects, I immediately got defensive. And without really realising it, I started to plan a case as to why it wasn't, to show why it wasn't my fault, while simultaneously acting like a little dictator. And I did this while snapping at people for being late with work, or for having the nerve to ask if they could use best practice in their work, which of course in that environment would extend timelines, and thus it was often rejected by me. Acting like this is, it's another huge sign that you're starting to lose your focus as a DPM and becoming something very different due to a completely shitty working environment. So, if this is you now, or if you ever feel this way in the future, just take a breath and step back and question your motives and your feelings, because you'd be surprised how quickly this can become your normal behaviour and blind you from the truth. A few other signs that you're in a bad place as a DPM are that you stop getting excited when a new project comes your way. This is often because they're starting from a bad place, bad timeline, bad budget, whatever it might be. But it doesn't really matter, why. What matters is if you feel like this or not. Likewise, if you often finish projects and there's zero celebration. And by celebration, I don't mean launch parties, but more that if you and your team feel nothing but relief when a project is completed, and when the next one arrives, you feel a little bit like a robot on a factory line. Again, that's a really, really bad sign. Okay, as is if you ever say shit like, "I'm not here to be liked. I'm not here to make friends," or "I don't care who likes me," and other variants of this. This isn't something that I've actually ever said, but I've definitely heard it many times, and every time I do, I really, really wince. I always wonder what on earth happened to these people to make them say such things and feel that way. And when I talk to these people, often you'll find out that they've been humiliated at work, maybe several times in the past, where they just felt if they were just a bit tougher, this might have not happened. But unfortunately, saying these kind of things and acting them out is not a sign of strength, in my opinion. It's just a defence mechanism, and one that will never ever go hand in hand with doing good. And instead, we'll only ever see you do well in environments that reward such awful and outdated attitudes. And if you ever say anything like this yourself, then quite frankly, I think you deserve a long spell in the shame cube. For those that don't know what the shame cube is, this is the shame cube. Yes, if only we could use that in real life, that would be a daily thing for me, I think. But seriously, being liked is critical to be an effective DPM. And saying that kind of crap is a huge sign that you're hurtling down the wrong path and at warp speed as well. So on to another big no-no, and another sign that you're going a bit wrong. Don't slide into a clique. Again, this happened to me, and it was another huge wake-up call that I was seriously losing my way. I see others falling foul of this all of the time, and it really makes me sad. My story is that many moons ago, I'm working at a company, and there were some senior people, and they really didn't like a particular person at the company. Since I started working there, it had been commonplace to hear jokes at this person's expense, and I laughed along with them. One day, these people were huddled around a screen on the other side of the desk, and they were laughing, proper belly laughing, really going for it. And I thought, this has to be hilarious. So I scooted around to have a little look. And when I looked at the screen, there was a picture of this person. Do you know what? They looked totally and utterly normal. Honestly, there was nothing even remotely odd about it, and it hit me. And oh boy, did it hit me hard. I suddenly felt really ashamed of myself because I realised what I'd been doing and why. I thought I was a reasonably strong person who wasn't easily led, but there I was being very weak and completely led. And the explanation was brutally simple. Because I was being so heavily scrutinised in a toxic blame culture, I'd identified the group of alphas and subconsciously worked out a strategy to protect my job by mirroring their behaviour. In simplistic terms, by making them think that I thought the same as them about something they felt really strongly about, meant they'd like me. And this, I hope, meant they wouldn't give me such a hard time at work. Or put another way, I was choosing to do well rather than good by accident. But the thing to know about this sign and all of the others is that they're not always easy to spot. Most don't happen overnight and instead develop over months and years. So slowly, in fact, that even if you're a person with good morals and a good character, you're still not immune to this, and it can catch you out given the right environmental factors. So, aside from making your own huge mistakes or listening to some silly little man on stage, how can you spot the signs and wake up? Well, constant self-reflection is important, but I think there's one single question where the answer does a perfect job of encapsulating the best way to stay on the right path. And that question is this. As a DPM, who should you be loyal to? This was a question put to a panel I was on at this event last year, in fact. A few answers were suggested, such as the client, the project team, the account management team, or bosses. Me trying to be clever, said all of those people. But Megan Wilker, she cut through all of this and gave her simple yet brilliant answer. So, as a DPM, who should you be loyal to? You should be loyal to the project and yourself. And that is such a good answer. And I believe asking yourself this question and repeating the answer will help you stay on the right path. So make sure all of your actions, decisions, and behaviours are based on delivering quality projects and not making other people happy, and it should help keep you on the right trajectory. Another slant on the doing well or doing good topic you can see in Mike Monteri's fantastic talk, How Designers Destroyed the World. If you've not seen this talk, I cannot recommend it highly enough for DPMs. I think it powerfully illustrates the possible consequences of where we could find ourselves if we're not careful. It describes how by not speaking up, you can start to lose your objectivity and independence, or in other words, become what I like to call a DPM drone. This is simply a DPM that follows orders and processes to deliver projects without much more thought going into it. Box tickers rather than thinkers who view delivering a project like a factory process using worker bees as opposed to a creative adventure you will go on together. Typically, when a drone is faced with a decision that requires creative thinking or cross-domain expertise, they split into two types. You've got your premeditated DPM drones and your accidental DPM drones. But as Mike points out in his talk, the damage that either can do can be severe. So to put this into context, imagine a scenario earlier where I described to the clients that their project would be finished on time. You know, yes, I was being a DPM drone, in that case, an accidental one. It wasn't sort of a thought-out, premeditated thing by myself. You know, but in that case, I followed my orders, you know, and in my boss's eyes, I did really well. I'm a team player. But what damage could that single terrible action by me have caused? Well, if the client thought that their project was going to be finishing on time, they could be doing all sorts of things, such as lining up TV, radio, or print campaigns for specific dates that can't be moved. They might be including expected revenue into their project, into their forecasting and budgeting for the next year. Making plans around recruitment, headcount, redundancies. They might have expected to make repayments to banks and also might have made promises to shareholders. And the list goes on of the really serious things that I could have affected. And the point is that by me being a DPM drone, even an accidental one, it could have affected hundreds of people's careers and lives. And that's simply awful. You know, and it's really easy to forget that when you're sitting in a meeting room somewhere with a couple of clients making decisions. So I think it's really healthy and important to always remember that. Another piece of advice that I live by, and Mike states, is to always be willing to be fired to stop awful decisions by speaking up. Now, while it's not easy living by this rule, it's another way to help you stay focused on what you should be doing as a DPM, as opposed to thinking about your job or self-preservation. And now, of course, I don't give this advice lightly, and I appreciate that many people have so many reasons why they just can't risk their job. In fact, when I showed a good friend of mine these slides, he kind of mentioned, you know, people with children and stuff, and I almost didn't include it, but at the same time, I think that this still is the correct way to operate as professionally and ethically as possible. I mean, and what really swung it for me was that if you think about it from the other side, by not speaking up, what you're effectively saying is that you're deciding to not do what you think is right because you're concerned about your job. And I'm sorry, that just doesn't sit well with me at all. So do the right thing, always, and no matter what. And maybe if more of us did that, we'd hear the following quote a little less. I hate project managers. I've never worked with one who knows what they're doing. They are pointless. I mean, ouch. You know, this really cuts us deep, in my opinion. And I think what these people mean to say is please, don't be a shit DPM. You know, for years, shit DPMs have given the good ones an absolutely terrible reputation. But the fact is, there are some really shit DPMs out there. And for a long time, I thought it was Boolean logic. You know, there's shit DPMs and there's good DPMs, and that's it. But over the years, I've found there to be two types of shit DPM. There's those that are shit because they want to do well and look good, rather than actually do good. And those who, they want to do good, but they can't. And so they just appear to others to be doing well. Now, to the shit DPMs who only want to look good, I've only got one thing to do in your general direction, and of course that is this. What I like about this is the intensity. I don't think that can be topped, plus it looks a bit like me. Okay, I mean, it's at this point, I do need to emphasise that doing good often includes taking the time to help people, right, including shit DPMs. Typically, the ones that want to do good, they are really passionate, and they love to be able to make decisions, push back to the client and challenge their teams, but they simply don't have the knowledge and thus the confidence to do so. So instead, they act as a messenger and just appear to be a DPM who simply doesn't care. In this scenario, doing well rather than good is to just sit back and enjoy how their slip-ups make you look better. However, doing good is to help them. Often these people, they're just too scared to ask creative or technical people questions for fear of looking stupid. And in their defence, you know, many creative and technical people can be found talking down to many people who don't, because they don't understand how people can't magically know what they've taken years and years to learn. So look out for this, you know, and be someone that a shit DPM, feels comfortable talking to, and mentor them until they don't need you anymore. That's the right thing to do. And the more people that do that, maybe we'll just have, you know, a few less shit DPMs on this planet. Okay, so I've mainly talked so far about how to spot that you're heading down the wrong path, but I'd like to talk now about how to stay on the right path. And first up is to never be a glory hunter. I honestly believe that if you enjoy taking credit for a project gone well, then you may not be a good DPM. Because DPM's are often the linchpin between 1 million people per project, it's really easy to be seduced into thinking that you are the centre of that universe. Instead, I think as projects come to a close, I think you should begin to forget any notion that you are the linchpin, and instead shift all of the focus and credit to your team, while you just sit back and feel a very quiet and dignified sense of pride. Being on a mission to do well means that you respond really strongly to signals from management that they like you. So you take credit for everything you can. It makes people like this feel good, and more importantly to them, look good. But how do you think the teams feel about that? Not great, would be my guess. On the flip side, when a project goes well and you deflect praise and credit to the team, it shows that you're not in it for the glory. And you know what? That builds really organic, authentic, and long-lasting respect amongst that team. And also within a good management team. A good management team, they will know damn well what you did on that project and how vital you were. And they'll also see you deflecting all of the credit to the team and note that as a sign of your character. And not only does this reflect positively on you, but guess what else it's doing? It's making your next project with the same team a hell of a lot easier, and that's a DPM top tip there. Always be thinking ahead to your future projects and not just your current ones. As a DPM, you do need to be tactical, yes, of course, but never ever underestimate the need to be and the power of being strategic. Okay, another tip to stay on the right path is to always be willing to learn from everyone. I found this to really help build a positive reputation, yet so often when people climb the career ladder, for some reason they think they can't be taught much from junior members of staff anymore, and as I'm sure we all know in this room, that's complete bullshit. So this is just really a reminder for you that if you feel a slight sting when a junior member of staff starts to explain their approach to something that you feel that you're a master of, just ignore that urge to scoff at them. Because Marcellus Wallace, as Marcellus Wallace from Pulp Fiction correctly states, all that is pride getting in the way. So you should drop the ego and instead just absorb the information and be thankful that you've got such smart and passionate people around you to learn from. Not only does this help you keep you on the right path, but your team and company will respond positively when they see that you're willing to learn from anybody, regardless of rank. Another way to stay on the right path is to always be humble and admit flaws. I think being humble is really one of the key attributes of being a great DPM. One way that really helps us stay humble is to publicly admit the flaws you have. For example, me, and taking criticism. Day to day, I put on this sort of act of being pretty unflappable, thick-skinned. If I'm really honest with myself, and now all of you, that's not quite true. The truth is that when someone heavily criticises my work, I immediately hate them. Immediately. There's like that. Hate them. And often these really, subtle signs that I feel in this way can be spotted by people, but I've not really worked out how they do that, to be honest. However, despite feeling the rage, I do try to act all cool about it. But I can't deny that there's a little bit of an irrational, nasty streak where I really want to lash out. It's really hard to be this honest with all of you. And it's even harder to be that honest with myself. Of course, it's so much easier on my ego to think that everyone else is wrong. But being truly honest with yourself, it's not just good for the soul, but it also allows you to define a sort of baseline for your negative traits that you can monitor as you try to improve them. For example, me, through trial and error, I've learned that if I get some scathing feedback and I start to feel that rage, I'll just wait 24 hours before responding in any meaningful way. And that's really because I've realised that immediate intense feeling that I get, it's dissipated by then. And I can really assess what's been, assess the feedback with a rational and an objective head-on. In my experience, by publicly admitting my flaws, I found people of all ranks to find that a positive attribute, which does good things for your career and in the right way. Plus, it keeps you humble at the same time. Okay, moving on to another tip to help you stay on the right path, and that is to act as a senior mediator. What I'm talking about here is with your loyalty always being to the project. If it's stalling, even due to your own CEO and, say, the high-level director of the client company, you shouldn't hesitate in trying to facilitate a meeting between these two people so that it can be smoothed out. If it's right for the project, then arrange it and lead it. And just because it involves senior people, you should never see this move as off the table. Because as a DPM, your job is to iron out any bumps and get morale and momentum back. And in my opinion, seniority is irrelevant to this remit. When I've done this myself, I've always been really careful to remain very, very respectful and ensure that both parties knew that all I cared about was the project and nothing else, none of the politics. And I found that if I always kept the focus on this, then the senior people actually really appreciated the kick from me and actually respected the fact that I cared that much about the project to do it. If anything, when I've done it, I found that both parties are often a little embarrassed that me, a low-down DPM, was sort of sorting out their mess. Now someone who was only looking to do well, they wouldn't dream of approaching their own boss and annoying them in this way. But I'm saying to risk it and do the right thing for the project, and the right boss will appreciate it. Now, of course, in the process of doing good rather than well, you'll often find yourself having to have some really tough conversations, with senior management, the kind of conversations that no one wants to have. So I'm going to give some advice on persuading senior management now. And when it comes to dealing with senior management, there's a few key facts that I think you should always try to remember before you approach them, okay? And that is that senior managers, they're just people like you and me. No better, no worse, just as prone to making mistakes and not always knowing what to do next. They haven't been trained, there are no courses to teach how to be an amazing CEO or senior manager. They're often unaware just how damn scary it is to go and talk to them about difficult things. They really don't get it. And they're rarely praised or encouraged by their staff. And often all they receive are non-stop complaints, week after week, month after month, and year after year. And often they are surrounded by people that will agree with them no matter what. Realising and understanding these points, I think, is the first step to putting yourself in a better position to be able to persuade senior management. However, the fact is that going to talk to your CEO or any senior managers about something difficult is really scary. I've been doing this for years now, and that feeling never changes. I'm a grown man, obviously not height-wise, we know this. But I still feel like a frightened child when having to do this. So in order to have these difficult conversations with the directors, bigwigs, whoever, you have to keep reminding yourself that it's important to you to do good and not just well, that doing good is worth risking your job for, and that it's really, really horrible to regret not trying what might just have worked. And if you can lock these in your brain, you'd be surprised at just how far they can push you. And I think another crucially important factor when persuading senior management is empathy. All too often, I see people charging in to try and persuade senior management with only how they feel in their heads. And that's really the wrong way to go about it. If you happen to be someone that struggles with empathy, or having empathy for senior management, then I do recommend you using some techniques that I learned at the Big Do event last year in Oxford, empathy maps and force field analysis. I wish I had time to go into them now, but I don't. But really, just Google them. They are very, very powerful techniques and great at giving you insight into other people's feelings beyond what you can do with instinct alone. But while you have to really understand what it's like to be a senior manager, you also have to extend that empathy to include what they think of you, the person trying to persuade them. The reason this is such a necessity is because you have to disarm them so that they're not focused on you in any way and instead objectively thinking about what it is you're saying. For example, in my current company, I'm in the development team. So to non-technical people, before I've even walked into a room, already I know that some people will probably have boxed and labelled me. Things like he's technical, thus probably not very commercial. In other words, they'll assume that my opinions will be coming from a biased, coming from a technical bias that values best practice versus making all of the profit. And if you're a DPM, then people might label you as someone that is biased towards process rather than technical or even commercial, and so on and so on. And of course, this can devalue your words before you've even stepped into the room. So to counter this, each time you make a point that you feel the other person will assume is naive or from a biased viewpoint, you have to surprise them by balancing it with a comment that dispels this immediately. Or you angle the entire conversation in a way that they just wouldn't expect from a person like you. The point is that you have to display empathy beyond what the recipient would expect. And if you can do this, it does demonstrate that you have a high emotional intelligence, that you do understand all angles of the debate. It shows that you can think commercially, technically, or about process. You can be tactical, but also competently talk board-level strategy. And using this approach really levels the playing field for the debate, and it really removes many preconceptions about you, and it builds up an awful lot of respect points with senior management. Now, the reality is that as a DPM, you are constantly having to be persuasive, and that can be a really, really tiring thing. So one of the final things I'd like to advise is that you pick your battles. Now, picking your battles is a phrase that I've heard since I started working, but only recently I really started to understand it. Early in my career, I fought every single battle and I believed in each one. But I soon gained a reputation for being sort of argumentative and stubborn. Plus, I was getting really tired all of the time. So I now find the art to picking battles is to keep focus on the strategic aims when choosing what battles to fight. And a good indication, if you've picked and won the right battles, is to look over a 12-month period and see if things have got better for you, your team, and your projects, rather than worse. And if better, then I'd argue that regardless of how many battles you lost or chose not to fight, that you've picked the right battles and done good things. And also, how you handle the outcome of battles really affects how people view you, which in turn directly affects your ability to do good. So, after any battle, it's so important to always be humble in victory and gracious in defeat. Because as I'm sure we all know, there's nothing worse than people walking around an office, showing off when they won, or moping and sulking like a teenager when they lose. And when you lose any battle, and you will lose some, how you tell your team about them is absolutely crucial to earning their respect, which again is absolutely vital when you want to be someone in that company that can affect change and do good. Ian McAllister from Amazon, I think, correctly states that the difference in how employees receive unpopular decisions often depends on how those decisions are delivered. He continues to explain how the more important or more unpopular a decision is, the greater the need to manage its delivery. On the same subject, he also says that good managers explain why the decision was made, whereas bad managers say because the boss said so. Okay, so to end this presentation and sum up what I believe to be the fundamental difference between doing good and doing well, to me, it really all comes down to one single priceless human quality, and that is integrity. On Wikipedia, integrity is defined as the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. But I think I prefer a tweaked version of Gandhi's definition of happiness, which is this. Integrity means that what you think, say, and do are all in harmony. But the trouble with integrity is it's not exactly something you can take a lesson for. It's so much deeper than that, and it has to be at the very core of who you are. However, just as with shit DPMs, I think there are several types of people on the planet when it comes to integrity. You've got those who have no integrity or any interest in it whatsoever, and these are the people that choose to do well rather than good. You've got those people that have integrity and do live by it no matter what, and those people are doing good rather than well. And then there's those people that I'm trying to target with this presentation, and that's people that have integrity deep down, but they find it really hard to live by at work because it's so damn difficult and scary. I've no doubt that there's people like that in this very room right now, and to you I simply say this. So don't be afraid, be brave and take that extra step. Push through those terribly powerful feelings you have when you know what the right thing to say or do is, but hesitate. Save yourself from having such, shameful stories such as mine, where you did well rather than good. Yes, you may ruffle some feathers along the way. You might even get into a spot of trouble from time to time. But I can assure you that that is such a small price to pay to be able to look yourself in the mirror each night and to know that for all you are not a coward. To know that in your heart of hearts you did the right thing no matter what. That not only makes you a good DPM, but also a pretty decent person, I think. One quote that I always hear in my head when I have an internal battle to build up the courage to do the right thing is by the famous and respected philosopher Bugsy Malone. Some of you may know, in the hard-hitting documentary about his life, is this immortal line. You know, you're going to be remembered for the things that you say and do. But in all seriousness, despite this being a kids' film, you know, I think that line is so bang on, right, and such an awesome source for constant moral guidance. Lock it in your heads right now, and use it whenever you're debating which path to take. I know all this sounds a little melodramatic, in fact very melodramatic in the context of managing digital projects, but this is how I've learned to define my own actions at work and also in life. I just stopped worrying about being judged by others, and instead my only judge now is my own conscience. And you know what the really big twist to all of this is? That by choosing to do good rather than well actually results in you doing really well in your career. In fact, really bloody well. I mean, seriously, when you consistently operate in a professional, ethical, kind, but brave way, doors open for you and your career all of the time because it's seen as such a valuable and rare thing. And these are the right doors that open, you know, the ones that lead down the right path as opposed to the ones where you're advancing your career in the wrong way and in a way that I believe will never truly be fulfilling. So my very final message to you is to get out there, and when you come to the many crossroads you face as in the future as a DPM, be strong and choose to do good rather than well. Make the DPM community proud by doing the right thing rather than the easy thing. Let's make integrity the #1 core value associated with digital project managers around the world. And let's show everyone just what bloody strong stuff DPMs are really made of. Thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you, Sam. What a way to kick off the conference.
Thank you.
I know that I've always learned really great lessons from you every year that you've been at this conference, and I think that one is no exception. We do usually have mics running around for the questions, but we don't today. So if anybody has questions, we will take them, but you will have to shout them out. Yeah, hi.
Awesome talk. I think
Okay.
it was an interesting point you talked about being willing to get fired to stop awful decisions, and obviously that picking the battle.
Yeah.
And it was sort of reminded me a little bit of a talk I think you did last year or the year before, also about sort of recruitment and the integrity about the.
It's the same thing, same talk.
Yeah. I said in terms of the integrity.
Yeah.
And if it's a point where it's not even about being worried to get fired, it's actually being that true to yourself, and you actually have to be like, you know what, it's not even worth having a fight, I've just got to walk away because I can't even change it.
Sometimes that's the picking the battles part. I mean, the important thing is that you don't not have the battle because you're scared or because you're worried to get fired. That's if you think it's not worth it, and it's not, that is picking your battles, you know. And it's a subtle difference, but when you want to have a battle and then think, oh, I won't bother. Even myself, it's really easy to miss the point that it's not worth it and actually just scared, or you don't want to get into confrontation, whatever it might be. You just really have to focus on yourself and check, just really make sure that's the reason you're not picking that battle, and you should be good.
Is there anything else? Any questions? I have a question. You said there about being willing to, I guess, face up to conversations you've got to have with the boss.
Yeah.
Is there a limit to that, do you think?
Well, as in how far you can go with that. If you ask my bosses, they would say no, because I don't. I don't think so. I mean, I've had to have really difficult conversations. There's been many conversations I've walked into where I thought this is going to be the one, or maybe even an email if it wasn't possible. Not ideal, of course, but I don't think you can go too far. I think obviously it's all merged into one. It's like picking your battles. Maybe if you're in a battle, you choose when to, like say, duck out. But that's only when you feel like it's not going to work, rather than I'm going to stop now because he's getting grumpy and then he might do this, that, or the other, or think this or whatever about me. Obviously, how you word it, you know, the empathy. Using the empathy is the best way to actually avoid them getting upset at all. Most people that speak to CEOs I've worked for don't do that bit very well. So when they feel they're talking to someone that actually gets it, and actually gets there's a bigger infrastructure or ecosystem out there in their business, they kind of relax. They kind of think you're, I guess, on more than their level, you could say. But yeah, there's a limit. But as long as it's for the right reasons, as long as you're backing away because this isn't going to work, rather than he's going to punch me.
Okay.
Matt?
Do you have any top tips for like preparing for difficult conversations?
Well, the empathy maps and forceful analysis is a great thing. It seems really weird, so I kind of feel that I'm someone that I'm okay with the empathy side of it. When I went to the Big Do event in Oxford, we did this exercise, and I actually used my current people I work with as a focus point for this. And the idea of the exercise was to really get into the head. What are they thinking, feeling? So I thought, maybe probably arrogantly, I didn't need too much of that. But when we did the exercise, that's why I put it in here. It blew me away. It really highlighted a whole lot of things that I wouldn't even be thinking. It kind of made me objective, so that would be one thing. I think that's about it, really. I mean, you know what you want to talk about, you know what you want to get out of it. I think the hardest bit is that empathy. I think I'm going to stick with that. That is the hardest bit. If you can show them you understand something that they don't think you can, be it strategy, commercial, whatever it might be, you've got to surprise them. You've got to show them that they're not who they thought you were. You've got a bit more brain than that.
Thanks very much, Sam.
Thank you.